It has been a hot minute since anything has been posted here on this channel, and I do apologize for that. I've been writing some stuff over the last month or so, different ideas that I want to talk about, some things I might want to review as far as movies or just books are concerned, comic books that is. And one thing that just popped into my head that I felt really compelled to talk about is DC WB and the weird hurdles that they give themselves for no real reason whatsoever, at least a reason that doesn't make sense, I feel, to the average person out there. Plenty of people love compelling stories of these iconic characters, be it Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, to a lesser extent the likes of Flash or Aquaman. And of course, Warner Brothers decided to just kneecap themselves at multiple points throughout the last 25 years or so when adapting these characters onto the mostly small screen.
I'm a bit more complicated than that. The inner machinations of my mind are an enigma.
Things originate back in the mid-2000s with the ever-infamous Bat embargo that was enlisted on all their ongoing animated cartoons at the time. Some of you may know what I'm talking about, some of you may be rolling your eyes with just the mention of something like the Bat embargo, and others of you may have no idea what I'm going on about, and for those of you, I have this to say. The embargo was made and enforced to limit the usage of characters to prevent confusion and the belief that using them in multiple mediums and different shows would cause the product or brand to be diluted. The original victim of all of this was Justice League Unlimited, but luckily they were a Justice League series, so of course a limitation of Batman-related characters wasn't necessarily the biggest blow to them at the time. Being a Justice League series, they could easily have episodes that focus on characters not related to Batman, like my personal favorite Green Lantern episode, The Greatest Story Never Told.
Here are your ants.
Thank you, Green Lantern.
I'm not Green Lantern. I'm Booster Gold. If I were Green Lantern, my costume would be green, now wouldn't it?
Or in the villain's case of things, like they weren't allowed to use Joker after a certain point in time, they could easily just focus on other members' rogues gallery, like Superman's, a villain like Mongol, for example. That being said, there were a few instances where the embargo directly affected the show, like Batgirl was in talks of appearing in one episode, but her rights were being held by the Batman at the time. Nightwing was also not allowed to appear in the episode Grudge Match, but they ended up finding a way to work around a cameo appearance for him. The first show to really be impacted by all these embargoes was Off the bat, Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins and Dark Knight had their villain lined up already laid out at that point, so automatically that removes Scarecrow, Two-Face, and Ra's Ra's, whatever you want to call him, Al Ghul, from the possibility of appearing in this show. I assume Zaz would have also maybe have been on the list due to his cameo appearance in Begins, but I feel like Zaz wasn't necessarily scraping at the door to be in an animated cartoon intended for most likely children. I assume the Joker was an outlier for this just because he is the Joker and he's kind of a mandatory need for a Batman series. Unless you're somebody like Beware the Batman, where you intentionally shut yourself off from the possibility of using him, Joker is very much an essential piece of Batman mythos that you need for your Batman cartoon. In the absence of some characters like Two-Face, they did manage to have a workaround with somebody like Clayface, who was essentially the stand-in for him with Ethan's storyline in the show, and I personally thought he did a pretty okay job overall. They told a pretty compelling story with him. But losing both Scarecrow and Two-Face are still pretty tough hits to take if you are an animated Batman show. I think Ra's al Ghul is someone that you can kind of shake off just because he isn't as integral to the core gallery as the other two are. Circling back to Batgirl, like I mentioned earlier, Robin had a similar fate for this series where he was being held up in Teen Titans. So if anything, this gave us an interesting take where Batgirl is actually the first one on the scene and Robin shows up later. And no, the Robin in this series is canonically not the Robin from Teen Titans. You can headcanon it all you want, but as far as hard canon is concerned, there are conflicting issues that prevent him from being that Robin. Meanwhile, Wonder Woman was having her own rights issues, as she tends to have for a good chunk of her existence as far as TV adaptations go. Her problem was there were hindrances preventing her and her derivatives like Wonder Girl from appearing in multiple shows throughout the 2000s. Some things she was prevented from appearing in were the final season of The Batman, when they were having that build-up with all sorts of Justice League guest stars and villains appearing in each episode. She also wasn't in Teen Titans, and it is also why Big Barda was on the Justice League in Batman Beyond and not Wonder Woman. She had to have been a premier character like she was in the Justice League cartoon, and being more of a supportive character for one episode was against the rules at the time. Reasons like that were also why she wasn't allowed to appear in Smallville, although there was another issue in addition to that. Similar to Aquaman, there was a Wonder Woman show that was being put in the works. Aquaman's pilot did end up being put out there, but the show wasn't picked up, so he eventually was allowed to be in Smallville. Wonder Woman's show, on the other hand, was in development for a much longer time and did get its own pilot, but it didn't officially air anywhere, and it wasn't approved, so she missed out entirely on the chance of being in Smallville. There was an attempt to give Wonder Woman a show during the Arrowverse era of DC TV shows, which is why there is absolutely no reference to her in any of those, but unfortunately for her, The Flash sped by her in production, and he ended up getting his show, where hers never ended up seeing the light of day. The reason for Batman not appearing in Smallville is simply just because of the Nolan movies. Going back to the whole not wanting to dilute the brand and preventing confusion, they, I guess, were worried that people are going to watch Smallville and assume that somehow this is connected to the Nolan movies, even though if you've seen anything from the Nolan movies, it would be pretty clear that there is no Kryptonian or any other superpower people running around that world, and there's no connection to that, but that was the reason why he wasn't supposed to be in the show. Speaking of the Arrowverse, that saw its own fair share of struggles with embargoes. There were plenty of characters that had to get written off or be danced around to appease the rules of the embargoes. The Suicide Squad probably being one of the first big ones as far as Arrow is concerned. The development of the David Ayer movie is what prevented them from continuing on the storyline they had with Argus and Deadshot and all of that in the earlier seasons of Arrow, and why that had to get axed. That's also why Harley was only alluded to at the time as an off-screen appearance, where she's credited solely as deranged Suicide Squad female, although she's still voiced by Tara Strong, and it's very clear it's Harley that she's supposed to be.
Man who killed my brother roamed completely free.
It's not freedom. It's work.
It's wrong.
Do you cuties need some counseling? I'm a trained therapist.
Pertaining to all the movies that are being made and stuff like that in the comic book world, it's also taking a side from the TV shows, because we had the Suicide Squad and these things inside of it, Argus. We were going really heavily into that for a minute. And then, I mean, something must have come down from DC or some higher up above that said, no, you must cease and desist, because we're going to make it into a movie and we can't have anybody spoil that idea. And we did get to see that little, like, pigtail and the Argus uniform and the little treat of a Harley Quinn, and then it just got ripped away. So if we could actually have Harley Quinn on the show, that'd be amazing, but it's never going to happen.
Producer Andrew Kreisberg also mentioned that him and Jeff Johns had to fight very hard just to get the brief cameo appearance in the show as it was. Deathstroke's potential involvement in the DC films at the time was also why he ended up getting pushed out of the CW verse as well. Batman was also very limited throughout this time period on all the CW shows. The most you would really get are very brief wink wink nudge nudge appearances or mentions throughout the thing, like him being on one of Barry Allen's contact lists during an episode of The Flash. It was that type of very vague things that you could reach for but didn't flat out acknowledge the existence of Batman. This was sort of a double whammy thing, partially because of the movies, but also due to Gotham being on air at the same time. So this again cycles back to not wanting to have confusion among people, and also Gotham had more of a tight grip on the Batman-related characters, preventing them from appearing in other TV shows. Even shows as recent as Titans still had a few hurdles in their way. They were eventually allowed to use Bruce Wayne, but they had to walk a very fine line with what they could do with him on the TV show as it aired. But as it currently stands, unless it's its own isolated thing like Caped Crusader, if there is an appearance by one character like Batman in a live-action show such as Peacemaker, it's going to be in continuity with movies and all those other things, and then you're going to have the isolated stuff like Penguin and The Batman, that's going to be its own thing. As it stands now, we are ideally living in a world where there won't be any major embargoes preventing anything like that from happening again. But that being said, it wouldn't surprise me if they make some weird move that brings them back, because WB is full of weird ideas these days. So here's hoping that we can officially put the whole embargo era of DC Comics to bed and move on and create ideally good stories that aren't going to be handicapped by stupid rules. I want to thank you for watching or listening, however you may have consumed this video. Just thank you for being here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, all the fun algorithm boosting stuff like commenting also. And ideally, I'll catch you guys in another video very soon.